The digital clock on the community bulletin board clicked over to 10:04 a.m. With that same dry, unforgiving snap I'd come to hate. Ashford Ridge, HOA looked like every Pinterest-perfect suburban dream from the outside. Manicured lawns sliced to exactly 2.5 inches, houses painted in approved shades of beige and taupe, American flags waving in synchronized politeness. But inside the lines, it was a police state run by one woman who smiled like she was doing you a favor while tightening the noose. My name is Mara Quinn, 34 years old, and today, in the sterile clubhouse boardroom that smelled of lemon pledge and old coffee, I was about to become the loaded weapon my father had quietly armed 15 years ago. The air inside the meeting hall was chilled to that precise 68 degrees Karen insisted upon. For everyone's comfort, she'd say in that syrupy voice. The same voice that once fined Mrs. Alvarez $200 for having her roses too vibrant. The mahogany table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, reflecting the tense faces of the other board members and the dozen residents who'd shown up for the quarterly review. They thought this was routine. They had no idea it was ground zero for demolition. The door opened with its usual hydraulic hiss. Karen Alderstrode in like she owned the oxygen in the room. She was the queen of Ashford Ridge, silver-streaked hair perfectly coiffed, pastel cardigan over a crisp white blouse, pearls that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. She smelled of expensive hand cream and passive aggression. As HOA President, she moved with the predatory grace of someone who'd never been told no in her little fiefdom. She nodded to everyone, that smile never reaching her eyes. Good morning, neighbors. Let's keep this productive for the good of the community. Her gaze finally landed on me. No warmth. Only that familiar sense of ownership, like I was another lawn that needed trimming. To her right sat Derek Nolan, her right-hand man on the board, and the treasurer who always looked like he was one wrong question away from a nervous breakdown. His eyes flicked to me nervously. Stick to the script, they seemed to say. The one that keeps the status quo buried under 6 feet of community standards. The chairman cleared his throat. Mara, we're ready for your report on the landscaping bids. I drew a slow breath. But it was Karen's voice that cut through first, low and conversational, yet sharp as a hidden HOA fine. Before we dive into numbers, she said, leaning forward with that condescending little smile, I was just thinking about your father, Declan. Such a visionary. He always had such high hopes for you. She looked straight at me. He used to ask, didn't he? When will you be half? The words landed like a slap in the middle of the beige paradise. The room went still. My stomach tightened into that old familiar knot. 15 years, and the phrase still had power. Other residents shifted uncomfortably, sensing something personal but not understanding the voltage. They saw a concerned president making a nostalgic remark. I heard the sharpening of knives. Derek shot me a warning look. Ignore it. Move on. But I wouldn't. This was the opening I'd waited for. I placed my sleek black leather portfolio on the table with a soft, definitive thud. Embossed discreetly, H1/2. Thank you, Karen, I said, voice cool and even. You've perfectly set up my first point. I opened my laptop. The projector hummed to life. The first slide wasn't a bid summary. It was a chart showing property values in Ashford Ridge versus neighboring communities. A blue line for the market, steady. A red line for our neighborhood, plunging unnaturally after certain improvements. The landscaping contracts, I began, my tone like a news anchor reporting a quiet disaster, have deviated significantly over the last 90 days. The murmurs started immediately. This wasn't the polite PowerPoint everyone expected. Karen's smile froze, a crack forming in the porcelain perfection. Derek's knuckles went white on the table edge. I let the red dot of my laser pointer dance across the plunging line, highlighting dates that just happened to line up with massive payments to Blue Harrow LLC, the preferred contractor Karen had pushed through last year for cost efficiency. These payments, I continued smoothly, coincide with front-loaded invoices that exceed market rates by 30%. Profits appeared to be diverted rather than reinvested in the reserve fund. A resident in the back gasped. Someone whispered, "Is she accusing the president of?" Karen's face stayed composed, but her eyes were ice. She leaned back, crossing her arms in that classic Karen pose, the one that said, "How dare you question authority?" "Mara, darling," she purred, voice dripping false concern. "This is hardly the place for wild speculation." The board approved those contracts unanimously. For the good of the community, of course. I clicked to the next slide. A simple table of dates, amounts, and IP logs from the HOA portal. Unanimous? Interesting. Because the audit trail shows only one terminal access the vendor approvals repeatedly. Yours, Karen. The room erupted in hushed chaos. Derek looked ready to faint. Karen's pearls suddenly looked too tight around her neck. I felt the shift, the first tremor in her kingdom of beige tyranny. 15 years of refining my hedges, shaming my holiday lights, and spreading whispers that I was the difficult one who didn't appreciate standards. 15 years of watching her turn my father's dream neighborhood into her personal ATM. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The clock ticked to 10:05. And in that sterile little room, under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry bees, the first thread of her empire began to unravel. The scent of cut grass and fresh mulch hit me like a time machine as the meeting haze faded. Suddenly, I wasn't in the clubhouse anymore. I was back on the wide front porch of our old house, wind chimes tinkling in the Florida breeze, my father Declan leaning close with that sad, knowing smile. "One day, Mara," he'd whispered while a storm rolled in, "you'll be half." I'd asked what he meant. He just patted my hand. "You'll know when it matters." It mattered the day he died. Mom, drowning in grief and bills, latched onto the first stable person who offered help. Karen's older brother at first, but soon Karen herself slid into the power vacuum like a snake in pastel. She didn't just marry into the family dynamics. She married the HOA bylaws my father had helped draft as one of the original founders. Rationalizing everything, she called it. Rational to consolidate the reserve fund under her oversight. Rational to approve her nephew's landscaping company for all maintenance at a discount. The power didn't shift overnight. It eroded rule by rule. First, the suggested paint colors. Then the exact grass height, measured with her personal digital ruler during surprise inspections. Then the fines that started small, but stacked like accusations. My mailbox too shiny. My car parked at the wrong angle. Each violation came with a handwritten note in Karen's perfect cursive. "For the good of property values, dear." The mask slipped completely on my 19th birthday. I wanted to use a tiny portion of my inherited trust for a summer program Dad had always encouraged. Karen refused, citing fiscal responsibility. While I pushed back, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave fingerprints. "You will learn," she hissed, face inches from mine, "that I decide what is rational." That night, I photographed the bruises under harsh bathroom light. Uploaded it. Drafted an email titled Simply Proof. Saved it. A digital time bomb ticking for 15 years. Karen took over the board presidency the way she took over everything. Smoothly, smilingly, with endless for the community speeches that fooled everyone except me. I left for college, majored in finance, learned how money hid and how it could be weaponized. I came back to Ashford Ridge only when the numbers started whispering lies. One crisp autumn weekend, I slipped into Dad's old workshop at the edge of the property. The floor's safe still open with my key. Inside the cream envelope, the notarized addendum to his will. The half-trigger clause. If the HOA Reserve Fund underperformed its benchmark by more than 10% over any consecutive 90 days due to self-dealing or coercion, I was automatically elevated to co-president with 50% voting power and full veto. Acceptable evidence included trade logs, communications, and documented proof of coercion. Coercion. Dad had suspected. He'd seen the bruises before he died. He'd built me a legal guillotine in the language of covenants. I started watching. cross-referencing public bid records against market rates. Blue Hero LLC kept winning every contract. The fun bled. Property values dipped. Neighbors grumbled, but stayed silent, because Karen's fines hit harder than her smiles. My digital bloodhound script, embedded in the HOA portal, flagged every overpayment in real time. I had audio from neighborly meetings where she pressured board members. And that old bruise photo, now notarized with a medical report, sat ready. The 90-day clock had started 92 days ago. Karen's greed had a rhythm. I just needed one last irresistible lure. 3 weeks before the meeting, Derek summoned me to his garage office, his version of a glass wall power play. The numbers look bad, Mara. We need to reframe the report. Smooth the curves. Bury the outliers. For the community. I smiled politely. My phone, face down on his desk, recorded every word. I'll see what I can do. Back home, I uploaded the file. Then I sent Karen and Derek a proposed major upgrade spreadsheet, glowing numbers for new gates and landscaping that would be pure catnip for a kickback machine. Embedded beacon code pinged the instant it was opened. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for her bite. The family-style HOA potluck was pure theater. Karen had insisted on it to foster community spirit right before the big meeting. String lights twinkled over the clubhouse lawn, approved wattage only, of course. Neighbors milled about with plastic plates, trading forced compliments while Karen held court at the head table like a suburban monarch. I arrived with a thumb drive in my pocket and a thin smile. Mom hugged me too tightly, her eyes pleading silently. She'd chosen comfort over truth years ago. Karen poured cheap wine into crystal glasses and raised one in my direction. Mara, so good to see you supporting the neighborhood. We've all been worried the city pressures might be getting to you. The subtext was thick. She and Derek had already floated concerns about my attitude to half the block. The meal dragged with the usual choreography, Karen pontificating about rising property values thanks to strong leadership, neighbors nodding like bobbleheads. I moved food around my plate, the scrape of my fork loud in the tension. She waited until dessert plates were cleared. Leaned back, swirling her wine with that smug predator look. So, she began, voice dripping false sympathy. Derek mentioned some concerns at the board level. Nothing to be ashamed of, dear. Not everyone is cut out for higher responsibilities. She took a sip, then deployed the old weapon. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? When will you be half, Mara? She chuckled. The table laughed nervously. Mom stared at her hands. I looked her dead in the eye. Tonight, I think. Confusion flickered across her face. She'd expected tears or argument. Not calm certainty. I reached into my pocket, placed the thumb drive and phone on the table casually. I was working on a proposal for that major gate and landscaping upgrade. High yield for the reserve fund. Sent it last week. Did you get a chance to review? Her greed reflex kicked in. I've been busy, she said dismissively, but her eyes sharpened. Of course. I powered on my laptop under the table, tethered to my phone's clean connection. 2 clicks, and the beacon file dropped into the shared HOA docs folder she checked obsessively. It's in there now. Take a look later if you have a moment. She excused herself 5 minutes later, claiming a phone call, and disappeared into the side office. The door ajar just enough. Less than 60 seconds later, my phone vibrated silently. Beacon active. User hash matched Karen's terminal. Timestamp logged. Then the second ping, my monitoring script lighting up like Christmas. Trade executed. Blue Hero LLC packet captured. MAC address secured. I sent the pre-written command to my independent lawyer. Trigger. Mom returned from the kitchen, face pale. Mara, what are you doing? I'm sewing the thread Dad left behind. Karen reappeared, triumphant smirk plastered on. She just skimmed more money from the fund she was supposed to protect. She thought she'd won again. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the plate. The sound cracked through the room like a starting gun. Karen stopped mid-stride. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked like a countdown. The first tremor hit at 7:42 a.m. The next morning, an official system-wide alert blasting every HOA member's email and the community app in blood-red text. Urgent. Regulatory hold on Ashford Ridge Reserve Fund. All transactions suspended pending state oversight review. Assets frozen. Alarms, literal and figurative, screamed across the neighborhood group chat. The illicit trade Karen had executed from her home office the night before had created a liquidity gap too big to hide. Margin calls on the fund's investments couldn't be met. The machine Karen had rigged for years ground to a screaming halt. My phone rang at 7:48. Derek. I let it ring twice, sipping black coffee in the small private room I'd rented far from the clubhouse. What did you do? He shrieked, voice cracking. I kept mine ice cold. What did I do? The fund is frozen. State oversight is involved. Because of your report? Your numbers? You were supposed to manage the narrative. You're mistaken, I said flatly. You're the one who opened the file last night. I just took screenshots. He choked. Hung up. At 8:15, Karen stormed the clubhouse lobby, bypassing the receptionist, face crimson. Fix this. Unfreeze our money. Security, 2 retired cops who suddenly remembered they answered to the covenants. Not her, blocked her path. Smartphones rose. Videos rolled. The meltdown went viral in the neighborhood chat before she even reached the elevator. The legal kill shot arrived at 8:30. Email from my lawyer, copied to the entire board and every homeowner. Notice of covenant clause activation. Pursuant to Declan Quinn's notarized addendum, the half-trigger clause has activated. Evidence of self-dealing and coercion filed with state oversight at 7:30 a.m. Mara Quinn elevated to co-president with 50% voting share and full veto power effective immediately. Emergency board meeting required at 10:04 a.m. The email explained the freeze. It explained my new role. It set the stage for the final act. I spent the next hour arming myself. Ran the access logs, 2 opens of the bait file. Derek first, Karen second from her home IP. Printed them. Unlocked my desk drawer and removed the sealed envelope containing the notarized wrist photo and medical report. 15-year-old bruises, now certified exhibits. I slid everything into the black portfolio embossed H1/2 and walked toward the executive wing. Heads turned. Whispers followed. They saw the quiet homeowner they'd ignored for years. They had no idea they were looking at the new co-president. The clubhouse boardroom had been rearranged into a U shape, turning it into a tribunal. Board members on one side, sweating. Derek alone on the other, already condemned. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, presided with calm authority. I sat opposite Karen, who vibrated with barely contained rage. The clock clicked to 10:04. My lawyer began. This meeting addresses the activation of the half-trigger clause. This is a farce. Karen exploded, slamming her palm down. This girl is staging a coup, falsifying data to seize control. I didn't flinch. I slid the portfolio into the center of the table. The evidence suggests a different narrative, I said quietly. I opened my laptop, played Derek's recorded voice, smoothed the curves, bury the outliers, manage the narrative. Karen blustered. He was protecting the community. I switched slides. The chart showed the real fund performance versus the smooth lies. Green spikes in Blue Harrow LLC profits, perfectly inverse to the red dips in our reserve. Dates highlighted, every single one a family-style potluck night when Karen had worked from home. The room went deathly silent. Board members stared at the screen, faces hardening from confusion to fury. They weren't just seeing fraud. They were seeing how Karen had made them all complicit. My lawyer read the clause aloud, voice steady. Upon evidence of self-dealing or coercion, the beneficiary shall be elevated with equal veto power. Karen's face drained of color when the word coercion landed. I opened the portfolio to the final exhibit and turned it around for the entire room. The certified photo of my 19-year-old wrist, ugly purple fingerprint stark under bathroom light. The medical report beside it. Notarized. Public record. The ghost of private violence now entered the public HOA ledger. I leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying to every corner. When will you be half? I asked, returning her question one last time. She stared, broken. Now. My lawyer's declaration landed like a gavel. The conditions are met. Mara Quinn is now co-president with 50% controlling share. No decision by Karen Alder regarding the reserve fund is valid without her signature. The boardroom froze in shock. Board members stared at me with dawning horrified respect. The chairman, a retired accountant named Marcus, found his voice first. The fund freeze. The regulatory action. What's the immediate path forward? I didn't look at Karen. She was already a ghost. The freeze is a direct consequence of unauthorized trading, I said coldly. But it has broader implications, specifically for the pending luxury gate and amenity upgrade project. A new shockwave. That project was the HOA's flagship, millions in special assessments, the one that would have funneled even more to Blue Harrow and lined Karen's pockets with undisclosed consulting fees. That collateral is essential, Marcus stammered. Without it, the whole financing collapses. Then the deal collapses, I replied. As co-president, I exercise my veto. I will not permit the assets my father helped build to backstop a project brokered by someone actively stealing from it. Panic flashed across every face. Public war with me would expose the fraud, kill the deal, invite state auditors, and destroy the HOA's reputation. Accepting my veto meant the same outcome. Derek broke first. He leaped up, face contorted. You can't. You'll ruin the entire community. I turned slowly, voice dangerously soft. I'm not ruining anything. I'm saving the fund. And ending a very bad habit. I slid a single crisp term sheet across the table. However, I'm not an arsonist. I'm a strategist. I've arranged an alternative. Ashford Ridge Credit Union, the HOA's biggest rival, offered immediate bridge financing on favorable terms. They were highly motivated to steal business from Karen's circle. Marcus read it like it was poison. It was a lifeline, but it came with conditions. The offer is contingent on two things, I stated. First, the immediate and permanent resignation of Karen Alder as president, effective today. Second, termination of all contracts with Blue Harrow LLC for cause, including Derek's advisory role. The silence was absolute. I'd offered them one clean exit from the inferno. The price was amputation of their two most diseased limbs. Marcus finally spoke, voice heavy. The board accepts your proposed solution. Karen's bravado evaporated. She fumbled for her phone. This isn't over. My influence. The other signatories will override this nonsense. My lawyer cleared her throat softly. I'm afraid the clause renders all prior structure subordinate. Your signature is now the only one that matters besides Mara's. And you are being removed. The phone slipped from Karen's fingers and clattered onto the table, the sound of her last weapon shattering. My lawyer slid the official veto document in front of me along with Dad's old fountain pen. I uncapped it. The nib scratched across the paper with a sharp, final sound. Mara Quinn. The ink settled permanently. The lock had turned. The door had slammed. The meeting fractured. Board members huddled in urgent whispers, already drafting damage control emails. They no longer spoke to Karen. She was escorted out by two senior members, hands hovering near her elbows, half support, half restraint. Her face was a hollow shell. The Queen of Beige had been dethroned in front of the entire neighborhood. Derek left next, carrying a cardboard box of his sad treasure belongings, head down, flinching as he passed me. Then I saw Mom standing behind the glass wall of the waiting area, face a ruin of confusion and fear. She pressed her palm to the glass. Her mouth formed one silent word, sorry. I walked over and placed my own steady hand opposite hers. We stood there, separated by tempered glass and 15 years of choices. I felt only distant pity. I let my hand fall and walked away. My lawyer waited by the empty boardroom. She handed me a new platinum access card. Mara Quinn, co-president. "It's done," she said simply. "It's done," I agreed. I looked down at the giant HOA logo inlaid in the marble floor. In my mind, I heard Dad's full sentence from that long ago porch. "You'll be half when you have the courage to stop the other half." He hadn't wanted me to own half the money. He'd wanted me to have the power to say no. A young intern with a recorder appeared. "MS. Quinn, quick question for the community newsletter. Why did you do it? Why take it this far?" I looked straight into the security camera on the wall. "Because a seam needed to be stitched," I said clearly. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside alone. The doors slid shut. The ascent was silent, smooth, frictionless. I rode to the top floor office reserved for leadership. Blank slate. Panoramic view of Ashford Ridge. Tiny perfect houses, tiny perfect lawns, tiny perfect lies. I sat at the empty desk. Removed one final document from the portfolio. My first order as co-president. Portfolio rebalancing mandate. Sell the junk contracts. Reinvest in stable growth. Restore what Dad had intended. I signed with Dad's pen. Sharp, confident strokes. Mara Quinn. My phone once. Secure notification from Arc Ridge Credit Union. Facility activated. The new world had clicked into place. The luxury project was saved on my terms. The HOA was now indebted to its rival. And it had all happened because I'd chosen to stop the other half. I stood at the window, looking down at the speck-sized cars and invisible lives. From up here, the numbers were clean. Systems. Understandable. Breakable if necessary. I closed the portfolio with a soft, satisfying sigh. It was no longer a burden. It was a verdict. The weight had transferred. It was Karen's now. A millstone she would carry forever. I walked out. The hallway was empty except for the blinking red security camera. I stopped beneath it. "Half," I said aloud, voice clear for the microphone to stop them, and whole to be myself. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Didn't look back. Nothing behind me but ghosts and perfectly mowed grass. The doors hissed shut. The line of light narrowed to nothing. The neighborhood group chat exploded the moment the meeting minutes dropped. Karen resigned? What happened to the reserve fund? Is Mara really co-president now? Screenshots of the veto email circulated like wildfire. The same neighbors who'd nodded along to Karen's speeches for years suddenly remembered every petty fine she'd ever levied on them. The tide turned with delicious speed. I didn't gloat publicly. I didn't need to. The numbers did the talking. By afternoon, the state oversight team had arrived at the clubhouse, clipboards, questions, forensic accountants. Blue Harrow LLC's contracts were frozen pending audit. Derek's home office was visited by polite investigators. Karen's nephew was already posting on social media about sudden business difficulties. I spent the day in a new office drafting the rebalancing plan. Every toxic contract Karen had pushed gone. Every overpayment clawed back where possible. The reserve fund would heal. Property values would stabilize. And the absurd rules? I added one quiet amendment to the covenants. No more surprise inspections without probable cause. Grass could grow a reasonable 3 inches. Flags, any flag, were now explicitly permitted. Small changes, but they felt enormous. Mom texted once. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message a long time, then replied, "When you're ready to stop choosing comfort." No reply came. That was fine. Some seams couldn't be stitched. That evening, I walked the neighborhood for the first time in years without dread. The sun was setting in that perfect Florida way, orange and gold over identical roofs. A few neighbors actually waved without looking away. Mrs. Alvarez, the rose lady, stopped me on the sidewalk. "Thank you," she said quietly. "My roses finally get to be vibrant again." I smiled. Real this time. For the good of the community. She laughed. The first genuine sound I'd heard on these streets in 15 years. Back home, I opened the old workshop safe one last time. Placed the black portfolio inside, beside Dad's envelope. Closed the door. The tumblers clicked with finality. The digital bloodhound script I'd built was no longer needed. I deleted it with a single keystroke. The hammer had done its job. But the satisfaction wasn't loud. It was quiet. Profound. The feeling of a complex equation finally balancing after decades of deliberate imbalance. Karen's house, 3 streets over, was dark when I drove past later. No porch light. No pastel cardigan silhouette in the window. The for sale sign went up the next morning. She was moving to a condo in the next county, the rumor mill said. Somewhere without covenants. Somewhere she couldn't control. Good. I sat on my own porch that night, the same one where Dad had given me the riddle. Wind chimes tinkled softly. No storm this time. Just clear stars and the distant hum of sprinklers on timers. I whispered to the dark, half to stop them. Whole to be myself. The chimes answered with their random, peaceful music. The next quarterly review was different. I presided from the head of the table. The board members sat straighter. The reserve fund report showed the first green shoots of recovery. No one mentioned community standards like a threat anymore. Derek's replacement, a quiet numbers guy with no agenda, presented the updated landscaping bids. Competitive. Transparent. Blue Harrow wasn't even on the list. After the meeting, a young homeowner approached me nervously. Ms. Quinn, I heard what happened. My lawn is half an inch over. Am I getting fined? I laughed softly. The new rule is 3 inches. And no fines for first offenses. Ever. Her shoulders dropped in visible relief. Thank you. Really? I watched her walk away lighter. That was the real win. Not the money. Not the title. The breathing room. The HOA wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was no longer a dictatorship wrapped in pastel and pearls. That night, I opened a fresh moleskin notebook, the kind I use for private thoughts. On the first page, I wrote a single line. Half isn't a share. It's a veto. Dad hadn't wanted me to own half the neighborhood. He'd wanted me to have the power to protect what was left of it. The power to say no to the other half when it turned rotten. I capped the pen, closed the book, placed it on the shelf beside Dad's old tax files. Outside, the neighborhood slept under its newly relaxed rules. Lawns slightly less perfect, flags fluttering freely, roses blooming whatever color they damn well pleased. And somewhere in a beige condo far away, Karen Alder was learning what it felt like to live without the power to measure someone else's grass. I smiled into the dark. The seam was stitched. Months later, the transformation was visible in the small things. The community newsletter now ran reader-submitted photos instead of Karen's curated standard spreads. The annual potluck featured actual variety. No more mandatory beige tablecloths. Kids played kickball on the common green without fear of citations for excessive noise. I stood at the podium during the next annual meeting, the same room where everything had exploded. This time the chairs were full of smiling faces. No one clutched their pearls. The reserve fund, I announced, is now fully compliant and growing at benchmark plus 2%. All special assessments for the luxury upgrades have been canceled. Instead, we're allocating those funds to actual resident priorities, new playground equipment, tree planting, and a community garden anyone can join. Applause rolled through the room. Real applause. Not the polite golf clap Karen used to demand. Afterward, Mrs. Alvarez brought me a bouquet of her brightest roses. For the woman who let them bloom, she said. I accepted them with both hands. The thorns didn't bother me. They'd earned their place. Later, walking home, I passed the house where Karen used to live. New owners had painted the shutters a cheerful blue, expressly forbidden under the old regime. A rainbow flag flew proudly from a porch. The lawn was a lush 3 inches and slightly imperfect. I laughed out loud. The sound carried down the street and felt like freedom. Back on my porch, the wind chimes sang their random song. I sat with Dad's fountain pen in my hand, turning it slowly. The weight was familiar now. Comfortable. My phone buzzed once, a notification from the HOA app. A new resident had just moved in down the block and posted a welcome note. No one had reported her yet for unapproved welcome mat color. Progress. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The Florida sun warmed my face. For the first time in 15 years, the neighborhood didn't feel like a prison dressed as paradise. It felt like home. Somewhere far away, in whatever sterile condo Karen had retreated to, I hoped she was measuring her own tiny balcony planner and realizing the ruler no longer worked on anyone else's life. I whispered to the chimes, have to stop them. Whole to be myself. They answered with gentle, chaotic music. The end.